You know, the average American probably can't tell you who lives in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Hello, Mr. Donald Trump. I am here to inform you that I am placing you under citizen's arrest.
What are you, morons?
But what they probably can tell you is who lives in a pineapple under the sea. Spongebob Squarepants is the most popular cartoon of my generation, and nothing else really even comes close.
That might be true.
Here's a challenge. Try scrolling through your typical social media feeds and see how long you can go without seeing anything SpongeBob related.
There I am, Gary, there I am!
You may find that it's pretty difficult because SpongeBob is absolutely everywhere. People post SpongeBob pictures from Tumblr to 4chan and everywhere in between. And even more impressively, almost all of the SpongeBob-related references, memes, and reaction images you see are based on the first 3 seasons of the series, a stretch of about 120 episodes that most people would classify as the golden age of SpongeBob. If you look at Nickelodeon's programming schedule today, SpongeBob Squarepants, a 19-year-old cartoon, still receives more airtime than any other show on the network. To put that in perspective, Futurama came out the same year as SpongeBob, and since then, it ran for 4 seasons on Fox until it was cancelled, and then acquired by Cartoon Network where it aired as reruns on Adult Swim for 3 years. Then, starting in 2006, the series released 4 direct-to-DVD movies until 2010, when Comedy Central aired the series for 2 more seasons until it got cancelled for the final time in 2013. That is until 2014, when Futurama returned to Fox for a one-time crossover episode with The Simpsons. And since that point, the series has continued to air as reruns on Comedy Central, and now Sci-Fi. And during that whole journey, over all that time, SpongeBob has been continually broadcast on Nickelodeon. If you compare SpongeBob to other children's cartoons released during the same time, nothing even comes close to its longevity. Rocket Power came out the same year as SpongeBob on Nickelodeon.
Oh my, that's louder.
And it aged about as well as Polio. Even historically good cartoons from around the same time as SpongeBob, like Powerpuff Girls, Ed, Edd and Eddy, Jimmy Neutron, all these cartoons were off the air by 2010, but not SpongeBob. And it should be no surprise why Nickelodeon still airs SpongeBob as much as they do. Since SpongeBob just keeps going. And for as long as I can remember, SpongeBob has always been popular. Everyone watched SpongeBob when I was growing up in elementary school, and as everyone got older and past the age when most people grow out of watching cartoons, SpongeBob always seemed to stick around. You were never too old to make a SpongeBob joke. Even during SpongeBob's later seasons, it never really grew stale for me because I transitioned to watching YouTube poops of old SpongeBob episodes.
Listen, SpongeBob, fuck you.
The first video in the history of my channel to reach 1,000 views was a SpongeBob YouTube poop. You could argue that the first 3.5 years of this YouTube channel were built almost entirely from the popularity of me remixing episodes of SpongeBob. Even today, new SpongeBob YouTube poops continue to garner hundreds of thousands of views, and extending beyond YTP, SpongeBob has become almost synonymous with meme culture on the internet today. From vines to reaction images to portrayed by SpongeBob, SpongeBob is, by far, the most popular cartoon character of this millennium. He has reached a status on par with the likes of Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and Homer Simpson. But by many measures, SpongeBob is a more relevant character than any of them. Characters like Mickey Mouse are superficially popular due to branding and marketing. Kids today are certainly not watching Mickey Mouse cartoons or sharing Mickey Mouse memes, and the character has almost completely receded into the role of a corporate mascot.
Principal Skinner, the happiest place on Earth is a registered Disneyland copyright.
No.
And it's heading for a great big lawsuit. You made a big mistake, Skinner.
Well, so did you. You got an ex-Green Beret mad. I spent the next 3 years in a POW camp.
Characters like Homer Simpson are certainly iconic, however they exist more as relics of a bygone era, Unlike Mickey Mouse, The Simpsons grew organically in popularity and became one of the most essential cultural elements of the 1990s.
Quality schmuck.
It's also doesn't help that they have like a lot of that relates to current culture, pop culture, ongoing thing at the time, and a bunch of contextual shit. But SpongeBob, they don't even fucking see, and he's a fucking sponge. It doesn't matter what time it is.
Quality. If I had a TV show, I'd run that sucker into the ground.
But it's 2018 now, and The Simpsons is not exactly the most cutting-edge programming anymore. Homer's legacy has already been decided, and the character has nothing new to bring to the table. SpongeBob not only rose to fame organically, but it continues to grow and evolve within our culture 19 years later.
Don't miss Nick's newest Nicktoon. It's a never-before-seen sneak peek of Spongebob Squarepants, right after the Kids' Choice Awards, tonight on the best...
Now when you think of the new millennium, you think of an event so gigantic that it changes the course of history. You think of a dawning of a new era.
Here's to another lousy millennium.
Downward spiral.
The term millennial gets thrown around a lot these days, and I don't really buy it. I think it's just a slippery blanket term invented by 40-year-old marketing people to describe young people who know how to use the internet. We're the first generation to have access to unlimited information. We don't fall for the same marketing tricks that corporations used on our parents, and companies can never figure out what we like because we don't know what we like. Actually, that's not exactly true. We know one thing we like, and that's SpongeBob. SpongeBob has somehow managed to become the most quintessential entertainment property among young people. This one show was able to crack the code of the most complex generation in history. In the entertainment industry, companies have invested millions in trying to come up with a character like SpongeBob. Every media company wants a SpongeBob, a character that becomes so popular that it practically prints money for the network. And ironically, SpongeBob wasn't created by a corporate think tank. He wasn't created by a fleet of overpaid marketing, public relations, and diversity specialists. The most popular children's cartoon of the 21st century was created by a marine biologist.
I actually, for a while, studied marine science before animation. So when I started to think, well, if I were to do an animal show, what would I do? Not one about bunnies or dogs and cats. It would be about these sea animals that I really like, and somehow all that information sort of collided into one thing, SpongeBob.
But have you ever wondered why SpongeBob is so popular? You're probably thinking it's the humor. Practically every reference to SpongeBob today exists within the context of comedy. I mean, SpongeBob has so many funny scenes that you could probably quote word for word. The style of comedy is just so random and zany and unexpected. So is SpongeBob's humor really that much better than every other show? Well, no, not really, actually. Plenty of cartoons have a similar style of pacing and comedy, and they aren't nearly as popular. Maybe you could argue that SpongeBob invented this style, and similar cartoons aren't as popular because the audience sees them as discount knockoffs. But even if that were true, the difference in popularity between something like The Simpsons and Family Guy is far less than the difference between SpongeBob and a show like Chowder. Something else is definitely going on here. So what exactly makes SpongeBob stick out so much from other cartoons? What makes SpongeBob so memorable? What makes SpongeBob click? Well, to find out, I decided to watch some old episodes. I couldn't quite figure it out until I saw this one scene from one episode. Then, suddenly, it all made sense. But before I get into what I discovered, let me first preface it with a simple question. Who is the most important character in SpongeBob? Now, you're probably
the colors, the style,
and thinking, no shrimp, barnacle head. It's the character whose name is the title of the show. And yes, obviously SpongeBob is the face of SpongeBob, but is he really the most important character? Sure, he's an energetic and optimistic protagonist, but then again, so were a dozen other cartoon characters from the 2000s. SpongeBob alone wasn't enough to carry a show to transcendent popularity, so who was? Maybe you're thinking it's Patrick and his hilariously idiotic quotes and moments.
You got it set to M for mini, when it should be set to W
Squidward,
for
test.
Wumbo.
But
All
once
the
again, the
personality traits, huh?
dim-witted best friend character has showed up in a ton of other cartoons before and after SpongeBob, so Patrick is nothing special. Maybe you're thinking Mr. Krabs is the most important character, and how his ruthless penny-pinching greed is a brilliant commentary on how massive corporations are suffocating American society.
The gentle laborer shall no longer suffer from the noxious greed of Mr. Krabs. We will dismantle oppression board by board. We'll saw the foundation of big business in half. We will send the hammer of the people's will crashing through the windows of Mr. Krabs' house of servitude.
But to be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand the deep anti-capitalistic themes of Spongebob Squarepants. So Mr. Krabs probably isn't the character that gives the show the widest appeal. No. The most important character of SpongeBob isn't Mr. Krabs, Patrick, or even SpongeBob. The character that single-handedly makes SpongeBob work is Squidward Q Tentacles. And it might not be obvious why, but when I watched this one very simple scene from the episode Dying for Pie, all the pieces of the puzzle suddenly came together. This short, basic clip with no dialogue represents precisely why SpongeBob is such a popular show. When I watched this scene as a kid, I was SpongeBob. But when I watch this scene today, I'm Squidward. You see, for kids that grew up watching SpongeBob, this show acts as a link, a connection, a time warp between our past and present selves. When we were kids, we all acted like SpongeBob. We were joyful, naive, enthusiastic, optimistic. Everything we did seemed like a new, fun adventure. Then, somewhere along the way, almost everyone turns into Squidward. Bland, cynical, pessimistic, trapped in the monotonous, never-ending routine of adult life.
Oh, hell no.
In case you've forgotten, here's how things work. I order the food, you cook the food, then the customer gets the food. We do that for 40 years, and then we die.
Get back to work, Mr. Squidward.
Flip it.
SpongeBob and Squidward represent a balanced dichotomy between the innocence of childhood and the cynicism of adulthood. Just think about Squidward's life in the show. It sure sucks, doesn't it? He works a minimum wage job as a cashier. He tries to find happiness in his only true passion of art and music, maintaining a sliver of hope that one day he can quit his job at the Krusty Krab to become a commercially successful artist. But his lack of talent can only produce works that are mediocre at best. Society rejects his efforts. He's told time and time again that his passion projects are no good, leaving him doomed to toil in a dead-end career of fast food service. He believes he's better than everyone else, yet there he is, stuck in the same pen as the rest of the simpletons. He has abandoned his dreams. He knows he's not good enough. Life has defeated him, leaving him to stew in bitter contempt at how society has dealt him an unfair hand. Now tell me, does that description not represent almost every young adult of this generation?
But a visit to the Krusty Krab makes everyone happy. And what could be better than serving up smiles?
Being dead.
It seems like most of us wish we could go back to being like SpongeBob. But do we really? If you strip away the bright colors, the wacky underwater setting, and all the weird anthropomorphic fish people, SpongeBob's life is just as depressing as Squidward's. He works the same dead-end job at the same fast food restaurant. He too has a passionate hobby that gets rejected by society. No one respects him. He's not tough, he's not strong, he's not cool. He can't pass his driver's license test no matter how many times he tries. SpongeBob's life is just as depressing as anybody else's. And yet, through all of that, he keeps his chin up and keeps on trying. SpongeBob is the anti-Squidward, and Squidward is the anti-SpongeBob. And their conflict is the essential thematic clash of not just the show, but the lives of the audience watching the show. Some of the best and most memorable SpongeBob episodes of all time are the ones where SpongeBob and Squidward are involved in the same adventure. Let's look at Idiot Box, where SpongeBob is able to derive more entertainment from a cardboard box than Squidward can from the television that accompanies it. Eventually, Squidward unlocks the same enjoyment by learning to use his imagination. If you look at the plots of many SpongeBob episodes involving SpongeBob and Squidward, you'll start to notice a pattern. Squidward and SpongeBob have to do some common task. Squidward's cynicism clashes with SpongeBob's enthusiasm until ultimately, SpongeBob's childlike optimism wins out, and Squidward gets to experience a rare moment of genuine happiness, only for his misery to quickly reset for future episodes. But what about when the opposite happens? When SpongeBob experiences a rare moment of sadness? Well, that happens in one of the most classic and popular episodes of all time, Pizza Delivery. It starts off as a typical SpongeBob and Squidward episode, with SpongeBob's optimistic spirit overcoming adversity and dragging Squidward along a marathon delivery route. For the whole journey, Squidward wants to quit. He doubts SpongeBob time and time again and even tries to sabotage the delivery at one point. And yet, despite all of this, SpongeBob's antiquated survival guide manages to miraculously bring them to their destination. And then, after all that effort, this piece of fat slams the door in SpongeBob's face. This goddamn barnacle head is the most despicable villain in the history of fictional characters. A character so hated that they never ever brought him back. This guy should serve as a permanent reminder that you should never act this way to anyone who works in food service. Their lives are bad enough. But anyway, this barnacle head gives SpongeBob such a brutal dose of reality that it completely shatters his naive, optimistic bubble. And we get a rare moment where SpongeBob is genuinely dejected. This prompts one of the most memorable scenes in the whole series when Squidward puts his cynicism aside and sticks up for his friend. It's a truly gratifying and heartwarming moment, and it really makes you wonder about the true depth of Squidward's character. Once again, if you really pay attention to some of these SpongeBob episodes, you'll start to notice that Squidward often learns a lesson or changes his attitude. In many cases, Squidward is as much of a protagonist as SpongeBob. This idea gets fully realized in Band Geeks, an episode that many fans regard as the greatest SpongeBob episode ever. This is an episode that hands Squidward the reins. He finally gets an opportunity to follow his dream and make it big as a successful artist. And just like every other one of his attempts at chasing his aspirations, it begins to look like a complete failure. But then, just when all hope seems lost, SpongeBob helps the entire town band together and they deliver the best musical performance in the history of the Bubble Bowl. And in the end, Squidward is hoisted into the air, triumphant at last, finally achieving his dream of becoming a successful artist. I don't care how long the series lasts or whatever the final episode is, because this moment right here is the true spiritual series finale of Spongebob Squarepants. And in my humble opinion, it's the most iconic moment in the history of the series. But why should we care about any of this? SpongeBob isn't real. Bikini Bottom isn't real. Nothing about SpongeBob is real. Right. And at the end of the day, SpongeBob is just a series of colorful images strung together for 11 minutes a pop. A TV show that hasn't even been good since 2004. But that's the thing though. Why did SpongeBob stop being good? Why do all of the show's most memorable moments seem to only come from those vaunted first 3 seasons? For most fans, everything else has been simply mediocre. Numerous essays have been produced attempting to explain SpongeBob's decline in quality from season 4 onward, citing reasons from creator Steven Hillenburg's departure to production changes to creative burnout. All of these explanations seem to have one thing in common. They all have a shared sense that new SpongeBob is missing something. And for me, that thing is the essential dichotomy between SpongeBob and Squidward. In the early seasons, SpongeBob was an adult with childlike qualities. However, if you pay attention to his characterization in later seasons, he's basically just a child. Squidward hasn't changed that much, but it doesn't matter, because simply changing SpongeBob was enough to throw their entire character dynamic out of whack. SpongeBob and Squidward used to be foils. They were both just a couple of dudes in the same crappy situation, but their outlook of that situation is what made them distinct. The comedy and fun of SpongeBob came from how SpongeBob and Squidward saw the world differently. And when you take SpongeBob and turn him into a brainless child who cries over McDonald's toys, you completely destroy this balance. You no longer have a dichotomy of perspectives towards adult life. All you have at this point is Squidward basically babysitting kid SpongeBob for 11 minutes. Rather than having SpongeBob act as a foil for Squidward, you make SpongeBob antagonize Squidward through obnoxious antics. This kind of stuff may have worked for Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, but it's just not the kind of stuff that made us love SpongeBob. And yeah, obviously there's more to SpongeBob than just SpongeBob and Squidward, but the same theme applies to basically everything that's wrong with the later seasons of the show. SpongeBob started off as something truly unique and special, and in just a few seasons they turned it into just another cartoon for children. The reason SpongeBob became mediocre was because they removed the spirit of what connected the show to adults. And sure, the later seasons of SpongeBob aren't that good, but you shouldn't let that detract from what the show managed to accomplish during those first magical 120 episodes. There are millions of people out there who grew up watching SpongeBob and are in their 20s now, people who probably stopped watching cartoons over a decade ago, but still get a kick out of SpongeBob references. SpongeBob managed to define an entire generation, and there are very few other television shows that can make that claim. I don't think there's a single other show that truly captures the essence of whatever a millennial is.
I don't think it went
a
woke.
generation who has been raised with
really
dreams of
awoken
grandeur
a
only to
sponge
fall
in the
into a
fucking
wasteland of mediocrity. A collection of young adults who desperately want to believe that they're unique, that they're talented, that they matter, despite finding themselves wasting away in a dead-end job lining the pockets of some rich a-hole. The sad reality is that most of the people my age are a generation of Squidwards.
Oh my
people
God.
who feel like they
Yo,
deserve
give me
better.
3 minutes,
People
I'm
who feel like
3 minutes.
society has inhibited them from fulfilling their true potential. People who have grown cynical and jaded and depressed because they believe that the world has screwed them. But I don't see why it has to be that way. I don't see why people can't try to be more like SpongeBob. I think when we grow up, a lot of us are so desperate to act older and be mature and cool and edgy, but I think somewhere along the way, a lot of us lose sight of something important. We are all born with an inherent sense of childlike wonder. When we're kids, everything is just so much more interesting. We're naturally curious, we're eager to discover the world and interact with it. We have hyperactive imaginations. We draw pictures, we write stories, we create things that have intrinsic value to us because we take satisfaction in creating them. And eventually, there comes a time when we just stop. The world stops being fun. We stop exploring, we stop imagining. Everything becomes dull and repetitive and uninspired. But why do we do this to ourselves? We suddenly jettison our capacity for creativity and imagination, and for what? To fit in better with other sad, boring adults? I bet that everybody watching this can remember a moment in their lives when someone has told you to grow up and made you feel ashamed for acting even the least bit childish. It's all too common for our society to stigmatize people who demonstrate signs of immaturity. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're a good...
But we're not gonna say you today. Out of all videos, you can say says you. Any other video, I probably agree with you. This is not
person, and you pull your own weight.
Say,
what difference does it make if you occasionally act like a kid?
Dude,
Being an adult blows.
Every day, tell me
taxes,
about
insurance,
clothing,
rent payments,
games,
lawn care,
interest,
litigation,
videos,
hair loss,
everything I do.
weight
He
gain,
said,
erectile dysfunction, and on top
bro.
of all of that, you're expected to be boring too. So excuse me if I'm unwilling to abandon my childlike sense of wonderment in exchange for those fantastic perks. You shouldn't have to buy into this nebulous perceived notion of maturity. As a matter of fact, most people don't buy into it if they're being honest with themselves. When you look at the comments of any YouTube video about something more than 5 years old, you'll see people nostalgically fawning about the good old days. It turns out everyone's in a race to grow up until they finally get to be grown-ups. Then, all of a sudden, they want to be young again. Some of these people have such a strong desire to return to the past because they feel like everything has changed for the worse. When realistically, the world hasn't changed for the worse. Your outlook has. You've become a Squidward. And remember, no one wants to be a Squidward. And everyone should want to be more like SpongeBob. I don't care if you're the most jaded, cynical, edgy dude on the planet. You should still try to be like SpongeBob because SpongeBob has something that the Squidwards of the world will never have. And that's genuine happiness. I guess what I'm trying to say with all of this is that you only get to be a kid for so long. Enjoy it. And even if you think you're too old, you shouldn't let that stop yourself from enjoying the same stuff you did when you were a kid.
But today I decided I'm not gonna hold my tongue anymore about you. When you play like shit, I'm gonna tell you shit up. The other day you were playing dog shit. I said it.
Right, I played like dog shit. Right, since the castle rustling Andy, no fucking army gets to.
Here's what I'm gonna do. I will make sure we transition into hyper late game by holding. I'm just gonna turtle the fuck out. I'm gonna have a bunch of towers. I'm gonna have walls. I'm gonna make siege when I reach castle, right? So that if they, I notice the difference. The counter to the guy what he was doing yesterday. After I reach castle is to make a catapult. One catapult, the guy would have lost the game.